I do thank you for giving me just a couple minutes of your time. This is David Tulis, the slow man of Chattanooga. I ask the dumb questions and the slow questions, and I hope that that is better for you. If you have me kind of looking out for you, then I'll ask the dumb questions that you, my listener, hadn't thought to ask, right? And partly they're dumb questions because I try to think about what we want to look into or look at every day, and earn my place as the blogger with the biggest pen in Chattanooga. That's David Tulis. The platform, the blog, if you will, that is the one for the man who matters is called Nooganomics.com. Nooganomics.com. And I have a review of City Church of Chattanooga. City Church of Chattanooga posted a long, gnarly piece that looks at the big issue of Christendom today. We are having this. In fact, this weekend, maybe Friday, I'll be having a date with my beloved wife Jeanette. We're going to a Reformation event at the Tivoli Theater, marking the 500th year of the rediscovery of the Bible and the principal doctrines that inspired Martin Luther and many others before a couple hundred years before Luther. Of course, there was Wycliffe and then Huss. There were some, you might say, proto-reformers, but they were reformers in their own right. They discovered the main doctrines that had been lost to mankind, that deprived man of God's grace, and that really put man's salvation into his own hands, right? And the Reformation discovered that by God's sovereign grace, through faith alone, apart from any work, man is saved. God saves man through Jesus Christ. That's, you might say, the one sentence that encapsulates the whole proposition of Christianity. Christianity is a legal and judicial and covenantal proposition. It is not religion. You know, in all religion, man placates the gods by his rites and rituals, by his asceticism, by like Simon of Styles sitting atop a pole and having an internal struggle with himself on spiritual and metaphysical issues. That's what human religion always does. It's always a work you have to do. You have to reach out for God. You have to placate the world and subdue matter, and then somehow you'll find God or true spirituality. Christendom, Christianity, and the Reformation put an end to that mumbo jumbo and all that self-seeking, self-glorifying labor that the man has to do to find God in person. God is in your mouth, you might say, and He is very near to us, and we don't have to do mental gymnastics and spiritual gymnastics and exercises to have access to Him, right? That whole connection is pictured in the Lord's Supper. We have a meal with God, and it is a spiritual meal, a memorial, a remembrance of the sacrifice on the cross. That's the whole Christian theory, right? And so we have in this question regarding City Church and the church in general in Chattanooga, the question of reform and reformation and reconstruction. And what I propose, having visited City Church of Chattanooga for 4 or 5 Lord's Days with members of my family. Not all of the family, of course, is here. We have had some who've grown up and left the house. One is a sculptress in Manhattan. She got there at age 17 and is living now as an artist and in Manhattan at 25 years old. I have a white hat hacker son who got a very high-paying job as a consultant just out of UTC, and another son who was a Marine badly injured in Paris Island and is in the trades in the Nashville area as a welder, and a motorcyclist who carries a pistol. He carries a pistol, and both my sons carry pistols, oddly enough. But I quit, by the way. I carried a Colt Commander under my jacket for a while, and it just got so heavy. I thought, I don't want to get killed. I think if I have a pistol, some officer fearing for his life on hearing that or seeing the bulge or something is going to shoot me. So I've ceased ceased today anyway, carrying that cannon. But if you go to Nooganomics.com, you can read that piece. I do suggest that you look at it. It's very interesting, and I can't really go into detail right now about it because we have some other things to talk about, namely namely the $399,500 payment by a California university to maintain the status of the ape. It is a remarkable story about a university that to maintain the status of an ape is paying a scientist named Mark Armitage that amount of money after a lawsuit. But just go to Nooganomics.com and read the story. It's a question about the big Goddard church versus the small Goddard church. Yes, that's right. Small Goddard, big Goddard. And the question is your God big or is he small? And I'm afraid to report that in Chattanooga, many of God's people and many of God's ministers, by dint of training and by dint of being children of their own time, perhaps, have the small Goddard perspective and would claim that God has nothing to say about economics, nothing to say about banking, nothing to say about copyright, and unmarked cars, policing, jails, cash bail programs, and the prison either in Wartburg, Tennessee, where I have a correspondent, by the way, and I just sent a letter to him yesterday. His name is Grenda Ray Harmer, and I'm trying to find out and trying to report on the prisons in Tennessee, and as best I can. And there's not just a fraud against God in prison. There is a fraud against the state in prison, and the fraud is, according to Grenda Ray Harmer, perpetuated by the for-profit corporation, publicly traded Core Civic, formerly Correction Corporation of America. And that is that is what I'm trying to find out. So the question is, getting back to the point about religion, if you will, does God have anything to say about prisons? And I'm convinced in reading the scriptures, this morning I read Romans 12. No, I read Romans 13, 14, and 15. It was my assignment. And I actually got through all of it except the last column. I kind of skimmed the last column, wanting to get to my preparations to meet with you, my listener here on the David Tulis Show. This is David Tulis, and I do thank you, the blogger with the biggest pen, the slow man of Chattanooga, asking the dumb questions. And there's a dumb question about fossils that Mark Armitage, who's a very highly trained scientist, is asking. And he's asking a question, but he also has an answer, and that is that California State University at Northridge is going to be paying him $399,500 for terminating him after he published a discovery. Okay, he published a discovery about one of the largest dinosaur bones at the famous Hell Creek in Montana. The largest Triceratops horn ever found was found by him. He's a ponytailed man, gray, with a beard, and he on October the 23rd was hired. Let's see, what am I saying here? He was hired in 2010 by California State University to operate its electron confocal microscope suite. And as a man who's published 30 articles in scientific journals about his specialty. Soft tissue, he says, in dinosaur bones destroys deep time. Now, you think about that for a second. What is deep time? Well, deep time is something posited by followers, a very confused group of followers of the evolutionary theory. Dinosaur bones cannot be old if they're full of soft tissue. Deep time is the linchpin of evolution. If you don't have deep time, you don't have evolution. The whole discussion, he says, if you show that the Earth is young, you can just erase evolution off the whiteboard because of soft tissue in dinosaur bones. He's a graduate of Liberty University and found that there was flesh in this bone that he found. There was unfossilized, undecayed tissue. Okay, if that's true, all right, if that's true, then it's impossible that bone was 65 million years old or billions of years old, as some people think the Earth is. The Earth is really very, very young. Bishop James Usher in his history, of which we have a copy at our house, posits the date. I think it's October 28, 4000. I didn't write it down. October. No, here it is. No, it's October 23rd, 4004 BC was the first day. So Bishop James Usher calculates, going back in the record, the Bible, and calculates that October 23rd, or the night before, was the first day, 4,004 years before Christ. That's the I think the Julian calendar, and that's there are other calculations. That's as good a one to mention as any, all suggesting that we have a very young Earth. And so he was fired. The problem was that Mark Armitage was fired. Okay, 2 weeks after he published published this paper pointing this out, he was canned in Acta Histochemica, is the journal of cell and tissue research, and he found a smoking gun email in which university officials, they could get rid of this scofflaw if they made his position full time. And well, it was a witch hunt, and according to Inside Higher Ed, and so there was a litigation that the university settled because it didn't want to have the long ordeal of a trial and manpower, time, and state dollars. It said in a statement. We don't want to have to pay all that. So we're not admitting anything wrong, but we're going to go ahead and settle for this amount. Prior to looking for soft tissue and dinosaur bones, Armitage studied diatoms, unicellular organisms that make up phytoplankton, which reveal a dizzying complexity and organization at the microscopic level. I mentioned diatoms here just by the way, because in my house we have found roaches. Well, what do you do for roaches? Do you use a man-made chemical, or do you use diatoms, which are the skeletal remains of unicellular organisms? And what we've done, starting in my son's room, he found a couple a few days ago. And so I said, well, let's get out the bag of diatom earth, which is called diatomaceous earth. It's a very special earth. It's a white powder. And if you sprinkle that around, you will kill all the animals that are in your house. And it's not unhealthy. Okay, I wouldn't breathe it in or anything, but it's inert. These are phytoplankton. And what happens when these plankton die? They're prehistoric. Right? You have to mine this stuff up. They have very sharp exoskeletons, which are like knives. Okay, and so if a roach crosses over a little field of white powder, it's very small, but he's going to get his legs all cut up, his underbelly all cut up, and he will all of his juices will flow out of his body, and he'll be dead before too long. It's all healthy, and we are going to be spreading diatoms along the edges of hallways and bedrooms and so on in the kitchen. And I crushed one yesterday night before I went to bed. I darted out into the garage to shut off the light in aisle number 1, where we have some of our foodstuffs. And there was a roach skittering across the gray pavement there of the garage. So I dashed over and crushed it with my foot. So we do have a problem, but I'm going to be relying on these prehistoric plankton in white powder. So that is just, by the way, something that you might want to take advantage of. This morning, when I went to a restaurant I had a few minutes extra, so I ducked into a restaurant on my way to the studio, and I was not served this morning by the man who's trying to become a woman, but I was served by Jen, one of this person's colleagues, and I've resigned myself to this restaurant, which has on the staff a man who's trying to become a woman, and he talks with a very high voice, very kind of forced, arched voice, and I don't want to be unkind, and I want to be gracious and loving as a Christian should be. And I don't feel I have to make a point or anything, but I'm willing for this person to wait on me if need be. And I've had to decide in my mind, okay, should I say, well, thank you, sir, or thank you, ma'am, or just speak to this person without any kind of reference of respect, which I like to do. You know, I say ma'am or sir if I can, especially if it's to a person of another race. I always like to say ma'am or sir. I always want to show deference and respect. And so I've tried to ask God to forgive me my sins, and I'm a sinner. And so here we have a man who's pretending to be a woman, and he's going to serve me a bagel or a coffee. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to just get in line, and if this person waits on me, I'm going to be very polite and thankful and hand my money over and take my coffee, and not try to make a point. You know, why hurt this person's feelings? You know, this man has enough problems already trying to transition over. And in my stack of papers, by the way, today, and I had that with me at my table. As there, I set up my laptop and sipped my coffee. I had a printout from LifeSiteNews.com. It's a story about the Weizmann Institute. This isn't a fresh story, but I found it this morning. It is in Israel, and there are two scientists, Moran Gershoni and Shmuel Petrovsky, at the Weizmann Institute's Molecular Genetics Department. And guess what they found? Or they have found that there are 1,500 genetic differences between boys and girls. It's not just your organs of reproduction, right? It's not just there that you're a man. And it's not just that you put a little makeup on your face or your cheeks or lipstick on that makes you a woman if you're a man. But there are many other indicators that separate the sexes, right? We are genetically consistent. Every man is a man throughout. In his brain, his skin, of course, his heart, there are differences in the sexes built into the DNA. And of course, the DNA in the embryo, the tiny baby there in the womb, forms as a man, right? So the baby boy, may God protect him and encourage his mother, right, to bear him to term. The baby boy is a boy throughout. Every part of his organ and all of his organisms are male. There are 1,500 genetic differences, and the girl likewise. And so we want every person to be born, every boy to be born, every girl to be born, and by God's grace, of course. And if there's no, as they say, gender dysphoria, if there's none of that, and one can become a true man as a man and a true, maybe godly, honorable woman as a woman, then they should be reared so. And be thankful for whom God made them, and not try to change their status before Him, because that's what they're trying to do. They're saying, I'm not happy with who I am as a man, and I must become a woman. And there is perhaps no greater height, I guess you could say, or maybe it's depth. There's no greater height you can reach in our postmodern time than that, is to undo and overturn your very sex. And it's not gender we're talking about. We're talking about sex. Gender, it pertains to the world of language, the world of language. There's a story I wanted just to mention about stereotypes. It's out of the Abbeville blog, Abbeville Institute in I think it's South Carolina. And there's some writing in this essay by Michael Armstrong about the Tennessee Valley Authority and the hillbilly. And apparently the hillbilly is a media creation. Donald Trump would say it's part of fake news. and it's fake news going back to the 1930s when the good people, the Yankees, were trying to acquire the Skyland area in the Virginia Blue Ridge Mountains in Northern Virginia. And they did that by coming in with science to say that the people they were uprooting were almost completely cut off from American life, completely uneducated. The women were beasts, and the children had no toys, nor did they know the meaning of the term toys. And to remove such people from their point of origin is actually a blessing. The same type of propaganda, the hillbilly propaganda, by the way, came in the creation of the Tennessee Valley Authority. And there we have a more impugning of Southern people. And often these Southern people have the Scots-Irish background. I think my name is Tulis. I know it has an Irish background, the poor Irish. My Catholic descendants were from Ireland. And Tulis, though, is not an Irish name. The TVA was created in the 1930s. And that agency began acquiring land to flood it, right? They were going to flood all areas around Chattanooga. And we read here about social management. There's a much bigger situation behind the Tennessee Valley Authority. We are conducting a social experiment. This is President Roosevelt, 1934. We are going to come to a shack in the middle of the mountain where there is a white man who, with his family of children, is completely uneducated and is progenitor of a large line of children for many generations to come. We are going to try to bring him some of the things he needs, like schools, all right, okay, electric lights, and so on. He went on to imply that the government has the right to take the lands of the Tennessee Valley because their owners had failed to use the land to its highest good. Oh, thank you so much. The TVA attempted to justify this accusation by portraying the mountaineers as people who are opposed to the rational use of land. There was a film that was made, a propaganda movie called The Valley of Tennessee, in which a hillbilly responds scornfully to a TVA agent who is trying to explain the wisdom of TVA's agenda. One TVA official uses inflammatory terms, such as frightening hovels to describe mountaineer homes, and beasts of burden to describe the mountaineer women. And Arnold Toynbee, the great historian, has a book called The Study of History. The modern Appalachian has failed to hold his ground and has gone downhill in a most disconcerting fashion, he says. In fact, the Appalachian mountain people today are no better than barbarians. They have relapsed into illiteracy and witchcraft. They suffer from poverty, squalor, and ill health. Just think about their bad teeth, right? The bad teeth of mountain people. In Tennessee, all the way, the article has a map showing from middle Alabama all the way up to New York. You find Appalachian people, right? People like maybe some of my ears, though they came from the Massachusetts area. They suffer from poverty, squalor, and ill health. They are the American counterparts of the latter-day barbarians. And so we have this and Toynbee admitted he barely knew anything about the people. He had kind of secondhand reports. Well, let's talk about lawyers for a minute. Lawyers are a breed that Jonathan Swift has a lot to say. He says, lawyers are those whose interests and abilities lie in perverting, confounding, and eluding the law. And judges are from the most dexterous lawyers who are grown old and lazy, having been biased all their lives against equity and truth. And here you just have to laugh, are under such a fatal necessity of favoring fraud, perjury, and oppression that I have known several of them to refuse a large bribe from the side where justice lay, rather than injure the faculty by doing anything unbecoming of their nature in office. It is a maxim, he says, among these lawyers that whatever truth hath been done before may legally be done again. Of course, that's the doctrine of precedent. And therefore, they take special care to record all the decisions formerly made against common justice and the general reason of mankind. They are bred up from their youth in the art of proving by words multiplied for the purpose that white is black and black is white, according as they are paid. To this society, all the rest of the people are slaves. Now that's I would just have to laugh at that. Now there are some exceptions, though. There are some exceptions. In fact, we have one in the studio right now, and we're going to meet him. He is a young man, 29 years old, has been studying law for a long time, and he's making an unusual argument about paper money. And he has what some would say is a fruity alternative, but one that has it may be fruity, but it has risen in value against the paper dollar like a mortar shell. Okay, there's a mortar shell that's been fired. Now the question is, will it explode? And when it explodes, is there shrapnel that's going to come out? And we're going to talk now about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the new digital war against central banking, which has also gone digital, but which has at its heart a fundamental flaw, and that is the lie.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM.
Is your bathroom sink nearly clogged? Act now. Stop procrastinating. Toilet running?
Ray's Plumbing, 421-6341.
Developing property and need a